Maggie Gyllenhaal, you star in the series The Deuce as Candy, who is a prostitute working in New York City in the 1970s. What attracted you to this character when you first read the script?
Well, the script was so good. I mean, it was David Simon and George Pelecanos, who are really excellent writers. And so I guess the quality of the writing, got my attention. And, I think it's hard to say what makes me want to play a character. It's like I just get this kind of magnetic pull towards something. And I felt that way about Candy. And I think also, I was interested in thinking about sexuality and power and femininity and, what transactional sex is, and I think it's interesting because, of course, we made the show before everything, everyone in the world seems to be thinking about all of those things right now, and in particular in Hollywood, maybe. But of course, we're thinking about them now because they've been on our minds for a long time. And, so I guess all of those things were interesting to me. It's part of what pulled me to it.
You're also a producer of this series. Did that make this a different creative experience for you?
I have gotten interested in producing, and I've produced a couple of projects since then and had been developing projects as a producer before that. But in this case, it wasn't something I developed. It was something that they came to me with. And I just was like, I had read 3 scripts out of 8. And they were asking me to play a sex worker. And I guess I just felt like I needed some kind of guarantee that I was going to be a part of the conversation, that of course, so much of my body was going to be required in order to play this part in a realistic way. And I also wanted to be sure that they were interested in my mind. And I'd never signed up for anything before without having read the whole script. For me, it was like a weird ask. And in particular, playing a sex worker, I felt like I have to know what story we're telling, and I have to be a part of helping to figure that out. And I was told by everybody, like by my agents and my managers and even my friends, like, you're never going to get that. This is a huge HBO series. You didn't develop it. They're never going to give that to you. And it was hard because I was like, I want to do this role. I want to play this part, but I can't do it unless I have some protection. Because I didn't know them, you know what I mean? We never worked together. I liked their work. I had a feeling it was going to be a good relationship, but I needed some kind of guarantee. And when they gave it to me, it was kind of amazing because it was like the beginning of this collaboration. It was like they went like, yeah, we do. We want all of you. And then it just continued from there. It was like a really exciting collaboration in terms of storytelling, in terms of what the politics of the piece are, and artistically too. They wanted to share. They wanted to collaborate.
Yeah. And it's interesting in a way that is parallel to Candy's story in the show, how she wants a say in what is how her body is being used and how her life is being run, and she doesn't trust pimps or anything like that.
Yeah.
So it does like, did that help you relate to her more, that sense of wanting to have that greater say?
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's always like that for me. It's always like ideas and things that are happening in my life are related to what I'm doing in my work, and are related to, not always as literally as here, where Candy, like, literally, she's talking, porn for her is really mixed up with her desire to direct and her desire to produce. And, even though there are a lot of characters for whom porn is really painful and exploitative, for Candy, it's like the birth of an artist, and I relate to that. And I did relate to that in terms of the process of becoming a producer too. I think it's true. It's really interesting how much it's like what was happening on set. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and since Candy has developed that interest in directing, have you yourself ever had that interest or developed that interest in directing in addition to producing now that you've done?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, do you think you might ever have that opportunity on The Deuce, or maybe a feature film you might work on?
Yeah, I'm adapting a screenplay now to direct it. It's very far from being a real project, but it's something that I'm working on. And real meaning having the money to be made. But yes, that is something that has been woken up in me in the past, few years. And yeah, I would like to direct on The Deuce. And I think that'd be pretty interesting also in terms of Candy's story. I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about season 1 at this point. We're shooting season 2. So, but she becomes a filmmaker, and that has been inspiring for me.
And another thing that's interesting about the Deuce, which you're starting to see more and more in TV, is gender parity among the directors. Half of the directors in season 1, at least, were half the episodes were directed by women. Do you think that was especially important for the show, given that it focuses so much on the experiences of and often the exploitation of women?
Yeah, I do. And I think, for instance, I mean, look, I have had really incredible working relationships with male directors who are interested in women, who are respectful of women, who are curious about like a realistic feminine experience, for sure. But, I mean, it is different working with women, particularly, I don't know. Well, I don't know particularly, actually, but definitely when we're talking about sex and we're talking about like really specific portrayals of sexual interaction, the transactional sex in the show, where guys are paying us and we're giving them 20 minutes or whatever. I think that's less what I'm talking about than like some of the sex scenes. Candy has a really interesting scene with a lover of hers, which was in episode 5, which was directed by Ute Breslowitz, with whom, I mean, I really felt I could explore, some elements of sexuality that I haven't seen on film and TV before. And part of it, I think, did have to do with the fact that she was a woman directing and had an understanding of sexuality from a female point of view. David wrote it. I mean, so.
Yeah, and the show also doesn't shy away from the darker aspects of course, Candy's life, the violence and indignities that are sometimes involved in her work. Were there any scenes or episodes that you found like especially difficult to shoot or to come out of?
I felt in the beginning, I haven't said this before, but I felt that I think like feeling sad or self-pity is something that I think people who are really on the edge don't have the luxury to feel. And if you're really on the edge and you're really just surviving, I think mostly you have to have a positive outlook. And you have to sort of go like, I'm good, I'm okay, next thing. Okay, that was hard, next thing. That was hard, next thing. And so I think I came off in the first few episodes when they were just first getting to know me, I think Candy was coming off as pretty powerful, because she was like, I'm good, I'm fine. Nope, I don't need you, Actually, that didn't upset me, I'm fine. And so I feel like the writers started to just give her like more awful things, then another awful thing. Like, let's see if we can bring this woman down, And I was like, nope, you're not gonna bring her down. Rat crawling up my arm, I'm good. This guy dying after a blowjob, I'm fine. I'm just good. Nothing's gonna get me down. And I feel like they just kept trying. And then finally, in episode 5, which is my favorite episode, I think because it's an episode of change, and change is always the most interesting thing to watch, she gets to a breaking point and she's like, I can't go on like this anymore, which is the most interesting place to watch anyone be, I think. Like, what's going to happen? Are they going to slowly die now? Or are they going to live? She, of course, decides to live, and that's like always good storytelling. So was I upset by all the horrible things, all the, like the real rat crawling up my arm, or, you know, all those guys? I mean, I just don't think Candy had the luxury to be upset by it. She's a survivor.
And the show is also extremely detailed in how it depicts New York City in the 1970s. Did you do much of any research into the period to kind of better inhabit the character and that setting?
Into the 70s. I mean, I watched some movies. That was a pleasure. I like the movies from that time. Yeah, you know, in a way I did. I was thinking a lot about how, well, I got to know some sex workers who were working in the 70s, who are now in their 60s, and spent some time talking to them. And also, right after the pilot for the Deuce, my acting teacher passed away, who was my teacher for many years, and she was in her late 70s. And she was saying to me, like, and so also the women, the sex workers were saying to me, being a sex worker or sex in general in 1971 had it was different than now. Like, you're coming off the late 60s, a kind of like exploration, a kind of freedom, a kind of like breaking everything down vibe was everywhere. And so that was interesting to me. But I guess I kind of think people are the same if it's 1890 or 1970, or, you know, people are people. I was more interested in researching, you know, really, what would it be like to be a prostitute in 1971? How many men would you be with a night? You know, what would you do if it was really freezing cold? You know, I mean, like things like that. I was more interested in that than like the details of the reality of the time. But there were a lot of people on my show that were very interested in the details of the reality of the time. So they kind of like took care of that for me, you know?
Yeah, prostitution is you know, the old saying is that it's the oldest profession, but there's still so much, you know, controversy and debate about it. You know, the legality of it, whether it would be safer or more dangerous if it were decriminalized. Did you have any opinion on those sorts of issues going into the show, and did the show have an effect on your positions on those sorts of issues?
I don't think I really knew all that much about it going into the show. I've become more aware of the debates that are going on now, like about decriminalization versus this kind of linking together of prostitution with human trafficking. And my sense is that what most sex workers want is decriminalization. And I stand with them.
The series was renewed, as you mentioned, for a second season. You're working on it now. Are there any aspects of, you know, not to give too much away, but are there any aspects of Candy's life and experiences in particular that you're really eager to explore that maybe we haven't seen as much of?
Well, I mean, I know I'm not allowed to say anything about it. I mean, you can see, like, she looks different. She's blonde. And I think if you watched all of season 1, I don't think you'll be very surprised about where she starts. I mean, Candy has a triumphant move through season 1. You know, it's not like without its trials and tribulations, but, you know, she's an artist and she's hungry to make work, and she loves film. And for her, it's like, okay, it's porn, but it's movies, it's film. And that continues in season 2. I mean, you know, I don't know. I'm not allowed to say anything about it. But we shot the first 2 episodes. They've been really exciting. And when I go back, I'm in LA now just for stuff like this. And I'm going back to New York on Monday to start episode 3.
And what do you most hope, you know, viewers, when they watch this series, will take away from the show as a whole, and from, you know, Candy in particular?
Well, I think it's complicated. You know, I think it makes you ask questions about about power and sex and commerce, right? Which is really what all of us have been talking about in terms of Hollywood right now, right? How have people exploited sexuality? How have they used their own sexuality, you know, to get the things that we need, to get the things we feel we need? How have women been undermined? And how has this like fundamental inequality in terms of men and women created a situation where sexuality is being disrespected, and where women in general are being disrespected, right? So that's very interesting, and that's really on the table in our show, 100%, like all the time. And then there's all these like subtle other sides of it, like Candy. You see how she's living what I just said. You see how she's got no resources, and so she's using sex because it's what's in her toolbox. And like, look, let's be honest, like until, I mean, what, 100 years ago, women couldn't have credit cards. They couldn't have a bank account. The only way that women could get, you know, what they fundamentally needed financially was by marrying somebody. So, you know, to say prostitution is the oldest profession, well, women didn't have access to very much else, right? At the same time, and this is where it starts to get complicated, like I said, for Candy, making pornography is what wakes her mind up, not because it's pornography, but because it's film and because it's all she has access to. So it's not like pornography bad and you're in trouble if you're interested in it. Everybody's interested in it. You know, I mean, even if you're really, really against it, it's still something worth thinking about, you know? So all of this, which is on the table for everybody, I think is really at play in our show. And I think the point is that the system is fundamentally broken. The system is fundamentally misogynistic. And so the way that all of us, men and women, exist inside of this sexist system, I think is what's interesting and what we're exploring.
Well, I want to congratulate you on the show, on your recent Golden Globe nomination for the show earlier this year, and best of luck in season 2.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, you too.